the Israeli military is killing Israelis still, like not just on October 7th, but they're still killing them in the Gaza Strip. An Israeli mother has accused the Israeli army of gassing her son to death like Auschwitz. The mother of Ron Sherman, one of the Israeli soldiers captured on October 7th, accuses the Israeli army of being responsible for her son's death in a tunnel in Gaza and claims he died as a result of the Israeli use of poisonous gas as part of an attempt to kill Palestinian militants in the tunnel. And here's her post by Mayan Sherman. And Wyatt Reed and I covered this. Basically, for the past few weeks, Israeli families of abductees in Gaza and people who were abducted and freed in the prisoner swap in early December have been meeting with the war cabinet and telling them don't put poison gas in the tunnels or try to flood the tunnels because it's going to kill our people, our families. And it looks like they did it anyway. They killed Ron Sherman and 2 other soldiers with poison gas. This was the gravestone of Ron Sherman. And it accuses the Israeli military of abandoning her son and killing him directly on the gravestone. And what happened? The Israeli authorities went and destroyed the gravestone and took it away. It's a cover-up. They're covering this up. They refuse to confirm or deny that they killed her son. And this is just one of many Israelis who have been killed in the tunnels or in homes in the Gaza Strip by airstrikes. We know about the 3 Israeli soldiers in Shujaiya who were killed while attempting to flee towards the Golani Brigade with their shirts off, waving a white flag, speaking in Hebrew. 2 were shot by a sniper, and then an Israeli foot force chased the 3rd down and killed him execution style when he tried to hide behind a wall. Here's Noah Argamani, who is currently a hostage who was taken at the Nova Electronic Music Festival. This is a hostage video. Obviously, she's under duress. But what she's saying, I believe. And what she's saying, she's describing how she survived Israeli airstrikes. Why do I believe it? Because first of all, number one, Hamas has no reason for these hostages to die. They have every reason to keep them alive. It's the only political leverage they have. Number two, this is what's happening to Palestinians right now as we speak on a daily basis. They're all experiencing this.
אני נועה ארגמני, בת 26 מבאר שבע.
Well, I thought this was going to have an English translation. Okay, so they're showing. These are the hostages, 2 hostages who were killed. This is her later after that testimony. I was located in a building. It was bombed by an IDF airstrike. F-16 fighter jet rockets hit 3 of us. 2 missiles exploded and 1 did not. In the building we were with Al-Qassam soldiers and 3 hostages. Me, Itai Firsky, and Yossi Sharabi. We're all buried under the rubble. Al-Qassam soldiers rescued my life and that of Itai. Because why wouldn't they? They're leverage. Later, we were not able to save Yossi. He died of his injuries. After many days, 2 nights, Itai and I were relocated to another place. While being transported, Itai was hit by an Israeli airstrike and he didn't survive. So they attacked them again. I remain injured in my head. My head is full of shrapnel and I have injuries in my body.
איתי סבירסקי, יוסף שרעבי,
Stein
שניהם
Swirsky and
מתו
Yossi Sharabi died
מירי
because of our
כוחותינו.
own Israeli
תעצרו את
airstrikes.
הטירוף הזה,
Stop this
תחזירו
madness and
אותנו
bring us home to
למשפחות
our
שלנו.
families. So you can say, oh, she's under duress, but logically, it just doesn't add up that she wouldn't be telling the truth there. And more Israelis are coming to this realization. Jake Tapper did an 8-minute segment on Kfir Bibas, who is a 1-year-old child who was taken hostage into Gaza along with his family. And, it's pretty wild that little kids were taken hostage. And it looks horrible. It is horrible. The problem is Jake Tapper deliberately ignored the hostage video of his father, Kfir Bibas's father, Yarden, from, I believe, November, where he is pleading for a deal. Sorry, it was in December, after the first prisoner swap. He's pleading for a deal so that he can bury his family because his 2 children and wife were killed in an Israeli airstrike in Gaza. So more Israelis were killed in an airstrike. And Jake Tapper and the rest of the whole Israel lobby, the Israeli Foreign Ministry, is saying Kfir Bibas turned 1 year old in Hamas captivity. His father's saying he didn't turn 1 because Israel killed him. Again, you can blame Hamas because they took him hostage for that killing, but it appears that he was killed by an Israeli airstrike. So Israelis are starting to recognize that the hostages are not going to come out unless there is a deal, and there is not going to be a deal unless there is a ceasefire. They recognize that. The majority of Democrats overwhelming, want a ceasefire. The majority of Americans want a ceasefire. The number grows every day. A ceasefire would end the shipping blockade in the Red Sea. A ceasefire would get Hezbollah to go north of the Litani River. A ceasefire would end Iran's retaliatory attacks against Israeli-sponsored terror. And the Biden administration refuses to do it. So they're going against the increasing will of large amounts of the Israeli public. This was a protest in Tel Aviv. And that, you see that number burned into the road, or that flaming number 136. That's the official number of hostages left in the Gaza Strip. And here are Israelis blockading a highway. I think it's the Ayalon in Tel Aviv, the major commuter artery that goes through Tel Aviv. They're turning up the heat on Netanyahu. This is what it looked like. And there were huge protests, not just in Tel Aviv, huge protests, not just for a prisoner swap, but a protest for a ceasefire by leftists. They're sort of coming out of the closet now after being terrorized into submission. They're starting to come out. Palestinian citizens of Israel were protesting as well for a ceasefire. The Hadash Party, which is a joint Jewish-Arab party that is officially socialist or communist, actually, I think led that protest. So the situation sort of changing inside Israel. We've also had figures in the Israeli war cabinet stating what we've been saying, stating the obvious. Gadi Eisenkot, who is the former Israeli army chief of staff, who lost his son and nephew in Gaza. He sent them in there and they were killed, invading and terrorizing people in Gaza. He has said, whoever speaks of absolute defeat of Hamas, he's referring to Hamas, is not speaking the truth, Eisenkot told Israeli Channel 2. And they're selling fantasies to the public. Eisenkot also called it impossible to retrieve Israeli captives without an agreement with Hamas, and called for a halt to the war on Gaza for a significant time to implement the hypothetical deal. This is the guy who was the butcher of Gaza in 2008, 2009 during Operation Cast Lead. He oversaw that operation. He's basically calling for a ceasefire because he recognizes the obvious here. Eisenkot expressed that releasing captives should be the main priority of the Israeli government, and that this cannot happen using only military methods. Haaretz has a piece that's worth reading, and I think the source must be Eisenkot, or it could be someone else in the war cabinet. and they're citing them, saying that Netanyahu spends no time on on the captives issue, on the hostages issue, and that as long as Netanyahu is in power, he's going to do everything possible to not get them out, but to keep the war going. And so this, I think, is the defining issue of the war. It's also why Hamas is emphasizing these hostage videos. They're not just trying to strike fear into the heart of Israel. It's not just about asymmetrical warfare. It's a negotiating tactic. And the Israeli public is emotionally, they're emotionally moving on from October 7th in order to save their own, which is, there's a part of the Israeli public that's responding rationally and is holding these mass protests and starting to think, how do we get them out? But then you have the religious nationalist public that still wants revenge, that wants to build the third temple, that wants to colonize Gaza, that wants to commit genocide against Amalek. And Netanyahu is catering to them because they are the linchpin of his coalition, Ben-Gvir and Smotrich, the finance minister. If they go, Netanyahu goes. And what happens when Netanyahu goes? He goes back to trial. His career is over. He's investigated for the failures of October 7th. And so they hold sway over this government and over the US government, which, as we've seen, refuses to pressure Netanyahu.
And maybe also the global pressure that comes from the ICJ case. We're going to get that ruling soon. Maybe that can, I mean, although when Israel gets criticized from abroad, they usually, everyone closes ranks, but perhaps that could add to the sense of pressure on Netanyahu. But yeah, as you say, as long as he's there, how is he going to make some kind of deal with Hamas? And with no pressure at all from the US, and in fact, just a green light, it's even with pressure inside Israel on him, I think it's going to be difficult to dislodge him.
Here's another pressure point. This is in the same Haaretz piece, citing members of the war cabinet speaking on background. Hamas has reconstituted its armed wing, the Al-Qassam brigades, in northern Gaza, where Israel just pulled back a division and said that they had achieved a strategic hold, as well as the residents of northern Gaza. They're coming back to their homes. Israel has done everything they could to destroy northern Gaza, the center of life, administrative life, cultural life in the Gaza Strip. And they're failing, and they can't keep their soldiers there also because of the pressure on the northern border from Hezbollah. They want to redeploy them. They also can't enter Khan Yunis and Rafah in the same way they could in northern Gaza. So there's no sign that they can defeat Hamas militarily. They continue to lose soldiers day after day. And yet Netanyahu, for political reasons, for reasons of vanity, cannot respond to that pressure. You have pressure coming in from every point, and Biden and Netanyahu are just stuck there. They're just completely stuck there, opposing the public in Israel and the US, in the Gaza Strip, the public across the Arab world. The only thing to do now is a ceasefire, and they can't do it. And it's the only way to get the hostages out. Wouldn't it be, you would think that it would be amazing for Biden or for someone like Tony Blinken to say, I arranged a deal to get the hostages out. And he did it by twisting the arm of this unpopular right-wing prime minister who's taunting him, who loves Trump and is connected to Trump. You would think Blinken would go, would then send the hostages who had been released over to Washington and have some giant festival with all of the, Jewish Federation's leaders on the White House lawn, and he'd be a hero, but he won't do it. He can't do it.
Because like Netanyahu, all they can see is supremacy. It's just like Hamas has to be punished. The people of Gaza have to be punished because Gaza is a place that resists. And if you're a hegemon, you just cannot tolerate that. And that's all they can see. Even if it would help their own political chances, they still can't even see the benefit because aggression and hegemony come first. And obviously for Israel, that's just in its DNA. It's a Jewish supremacist state. That's the only framework that they can use to see the world.
The dominant faction and the incipient ascendant faction in Israeli society are the religious nationalists. And I mean, they held a protest in southern Israel to try to blockade aid trucks that were going into Gaza as part of a deal brokered by Qatar. And those aid trucks were going not just to common starving civilians in Gaza where there's famine. They were going to the hostages themselves. That was part of the deal, that they would specifically serve the hostages. So you had supporters of Netanyahu's coalition trying to block aid for the hostages themselves.
That's crazy. That's crazy. And
They
look,
want them dead.
look at this quote. This is from an Israeli official with COGAT, which is the occupation authority for the West Bank and Gaza. And this person says, there is no hunger in Gaza. There were stockpiles of food in Gaza. Don't forget that this is an Arab Gazan population whose DNA is to hoard, certainly when it comes to food.
Yeah, thank you, Colonel A. Colonel A is so brave. All these genocidal maniacs, they're all like the Air Force pilots and COGAT calorie counters, concentration camp administrators. They never reveal their real names because they know they could go to a modern day Nuremberg if the ICC actually was a functional entity. But there's video, plentiful video of Israeli soldiers destroying aid, destroying UN storehouses. You can see any aid truck that comes into Gaza gets swarmed by starving people. The goal of every father in northern Gaza is to get a bag of flour for his family. And on January 11th, this is well documented by Euromed, Human Rights Monitor, Middle East Eye had a piece on it. There were so many eyewitnesses. Hundreds of people were waiting for one of the rare aid trucks in northern Gaza, and Israel sent a tank on them and started firing on them, then sent quadricopters to shoot at them from the air. Over 50 were killed, and the rest were sent fleeing just because they were waiting for an aid truck. This is the legacy of Tony Blinken. It could all be ended with a ceasefire. The hostages would come out. They don't want that. They want domination, hegemony, and supremacy.